everyone, here is my sewing tutorial on the Children's Corner pattern Johnny. Now Johnny is a romper style garment that can be made for either girls or boys depending on how you embellish and what fabrics you use, all that jazz. Also, it has an optional smocking insert, and this video will show you how to put together the romper with or without the smocked insert. So to get started, you'll cut out your pieces. Now I'm doing the smock insert, so I mark my fabric using the pattern piece and then I just give it a rip. And if you've seen my other videos, you know I'm a big fan of ripping fabric since it keeps things on the grain and it is quick and easy. Then you'll have 2 of the romper backs as well as 2 of these on the lining, so you'll have 4 total. You'll also have 2 of the romper front pieces, and make sure to cut out the appropriate smocked or non-smocked version for the garment style that you are making. And you'll also have 2 of the romper lining pieces. And you can see how things will go together differently depending on whether you're doing that smocked insert or not. It's kind of simply like an adding or subtracting of fabric to account for the insert or not doing the insert. And you'll also need to cut out these little side extensions if you are doing the smocking plate. These extensions basically allow you to bypass dealing with the armhole curves on your smocking insert. It's just a little bit easier. But that definitely is an option if you'd rather have the look of one solid piece of fabric for your insert. And if you know what I'm talking about, you can probably take it from there. But anywho, to get started with the smocking insert, you'll iron it and roll it up on a dowel. If you aren't doing the smocking insert, just look to the description box below to see what timestamp to jump to. As always, all the timestamps and materials needed are below in the description box. Then I threaded up whole spaces on my pleater, although that's optional and you are more than welcome to do half spaces if you wish. Then I tied off one end of those threads in groups of 2s. And next I took some freezer paper and cut it to the size of the smocking blocking pattern piece. Say that 10 times fast. I have a detailed video about this freezer paper that's linked below, but basically you're going to cut it out with paper safe scissors, and then I pinned it to my blocking board so I could get my smocking insert ready. And I pinned one side of that smocked fabric in line with the freezer paper and then adjusted my smocking insert until it looked as I desired. I knew ahead of time that this piece of fabric was going to be too long for my smocking insert. I did that on purpose so I could adjust these pleats accordingly, and I know that I'm going to be doing some picture smocking, and that requires the pleats to be a bit closer together than the regular geometric smocking. So once I had my smocking insert adjusted accordingly, then I pulled the threads out of that last pleat and I tied them in groups of 2s, and then I just trimmed off the rest of that fabric. Okay, so you can take that freezer paper and make sure that all of those pleats are nice and tidy. And then take the freezer paper and iron it with the glossy side facing down, touching your fabric. And allow that to cool for a minute or so before picking up the fabric freezer paper assembly. And you've essentially frozen those pleats in their nice and tidy place so you can take it to your machine and sew without the pleats moving around on you. If you want to put piping on your smocked insert, you'll do this now, and of course it's an optional step. But if you did the piping, you can carefully take off your freezer paper. You'll just tear off one side and then the other side will kind of just slide out. Now do make sure to look over those stitches just to make sure that none of them were torn in the process, but if they were, it's no big deal. Just go over those torn stitches with your machine. Now you'll sew on the side extensions onto the smocking insert, and I like to sew with the smocking insert facing up so I can be sure that I am just on the outside of that last pleat. The goal here is to have a clean transition between your last pleat and your side extension fabric. A gap does not look the best here. It's a little on the messy side. Then you can sew the yoke top to the top of your smocking insert, and I like to sew again with the smocking side facing up so I can see my previous stitches of the piping. Now if you didn't do the smocking insert, you'll be sewing the yoke top to the top of the romper front. Of course, first you'll need to sew the romper fronts together at the crotch. Once those are sewed together, you can clip the curve area and iron the seam down, and then you'll be able to sew this to the bottom of the smocking insert or to your yoke top piece, depending on what view you are making. And at this point, you can take off your freezer paper if you did the smock view without the piping. And regardless of whether you are doing the smock view or not, you will have the front of your romper together. and you can move on to the back of your romper. The back is sewn in the same manner regardless of whether the front is smocked or not. So you'll first sew down that crotch section and again clip the curve area and iron the seam. Then match the romper front with the romper back with right sides together and sew down one of the side seams. It doesn't matter which one, just pick a side. And go ahead and give that seam an ironing. Now if you want to put the piping on top of the romper, go ahead and do that now. I'm roughly measuring out how much piping I need so I can cut that piece and trim it down to 1/4 inch width. It comes like 1/2 inch or something, but I just use my pressure foot as like another hand, if you will, so I can trim the piping down to 1/4 inch since that's the allotted seam allowance. And it just makes life easier, which I am all about, y'all. Now, just before I get to a corner, I make some clips at the corner area so the piping will lay flat. And I just put my needle down and turn when I get to the actual corner, and then you can continue on sewing. And oh, I forgot about that. This is little baby Audrey. This garment took way longer than it should have to complete with all the moving we did last year, but it's not that hard, and it's finally done now, so whatever. Moving on, you can iron the piping in place and finally sew the same side together for your lining. And yes, my back pieces for my lining are out of white Imperial Batiste because I somehow ran out of corduroy. I guess I didn't order enough. But this is one of the many reasons I like keeping white Imperial Batiste on hand. It's very useful for these situations. Anywho, after ironing that seam down, you can join the lining to the romper, and you'll do this by sewing around the top of the romper as well as the bottom leg area. And I like to use pins in situations like this because it's really easy for everything to shift when you start sewing, or at least that's my experience. So after you sew around the top and around, one leg, through that crotch, back down to the other leg, you'll trim the seam allowances down. And then you can turn the romper right sides out and push all of those corners out into like a nice, neat little point. So give everything a good ironing and you will be done with the construction until after your smocking is done. Of course, that's if you're doing the smocking view. Now, if you aren't doing the smocking view, then go jump ahead again. If you are doing the smocking view, come back to this video when you've completed your smocking. So to finish the garment, you'll line up the remaining sides together, placing right sides together. Start in the lower section of the lining, sew around to the right side of the garment and back down to the top of the lining section, and then stop. And this will leave you with a gap, and this gap should be big enough to get your hand in and turn the garment right sides out. So, 3-4 inches or whatever. So to finish the straps as well as the crotch area, I place snaps using the snap setter, and I have a video on how to do that I will link below. I simply love these snaps. These are the same ones you'll find in professionally made clothes like at Carter's or whatever, and you can just rip them open and they will hold up just fine. It's very convenient for diaper changes and such. Now the very last part is to close that little gap. To do this, I double threaded a needle since that leaves me with a loop at the bottom, and I can use this loop to attach my thread to the lining. So from there, I used the ladder stitch to go from one side up about 1/4 inch or so, straight across to the other side, and you kind of rinse and repeat that process, and this leaves you with an invisible line of stitches. It's a really kind of a clean finish, at least in my opinion. And there you have it, almost a year in the works with all of my moving drama this past year, but Children's Corner Johnny is finally out. I hope this video was helpful. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below, and I will do my best to answer them. As always, I appreciate y'all for watching, and I hope to catch y'all next time.